Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today I am using the Out West red rubber stamps. This also has dies. We'll be using those as well. And then for the sentiment, we are using Saddle Up. I did not use the dies today, but they are available. So for this video, we're going to talk about how we kind of can tackle a more involved scene in coloring, because sometimes it can be really overwhelming. So for this one, because it's a red rubber stamp, I'm going to remove the foam out of my Misty because the red rubber stamp has the foam built in. And then I'm going to stamp down in the intense black ink from Honeybee because I'm going to be coloring with my alcohol markers. So this you could use by itself, just stamp it down and you would have a pretty full card, like a full focal point. But I also wanted to incorporate the other two pieces that have the coordinating die into the scene to show you kind of how you can switch it up and change the way that it looks. I think for me, that's super important when I'm buying a set. I want to know that there's more than one way that I can use it. So here I'm stamping them down the same thing in that intense black ink. And then from here, we're going to pretty much get right into the coloring. All of this is colored with alcohol markers. You could use whatever color medium works for you. The approach does not change. So here I've pulled out some of the lighter colors. This isn't necessarily the colors that all of the things are going to end up being, but I did try to do my best to eyeball it. And what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm doing what I call mapping. So I'm finding the areas that I know what color they're going to be, and I'm filling them in with that super light color. This is going to help me to break it up and create some separation so that it is more manageable to color in kind of like chunks or categories instead of looking at the whole thing and feeling like really super overwhelmed. So for the kind of rock outcropping in the background, I know that's going to be brown, as well as the almost kind of like aisleway that's created with the different like cacti and grasses and things like that. Then from there, I know that I'm going to use a couple of different greens because I like a lot of color variation. I think it makes the scene more interesting, especially when we're not doing really anything but coloring. So I am looking for like things. So like cacti that are drawn similarly, and I'm filling them in with this G00. And then from there, I'm going to switch to more of a yellow green. And again, I'm looking for kind of like shaped cacti. The more round ones is what I am looking for, and that I am filling in with that YG03. I probably could have gone a little bit lighter with this. I probably could have mapped it with a YG01, but I did what I did. I have no regrets about the way that it came out looking. And then I know that there are some kind of flowers that are included on, the cacti. So I'm picking out a couple to do pink and a couple to do like a purplish color. I think those are going to play really nicely with the warmer tones we have on the ground. And then I am going to have to find yet another green. This time I chose a blue green because I have a lot of these grasses in between. And there's, as you were looking at this and the way that it's drawn, there's a lot of items that are closest to that kind of rock formation that aren't necessarily going to have a ton of detail, but coloring them the same as things that are closer with the detail, your brain is going to kind of help fill those things in. So I'm just making sure that I have everything filled in, and then I will be able to go in with my actual colors that I chose and see it as, something that's much more manageable because it's kind of been broken down. So for my ground and my rock, I chose the E30s family, which in Copics is a red brown. After looking, I live in Ohio. I do not live in a desert. And I have not really been to any desert states, really. So I did do some looking at some pictures to make sure that I was kind of going to get my color right. I chose to do a day scene here, but you absolutely could do this, with a sunset or a sunrise, and that would be super pretty. But basically what I'm doing is I'm going in, I'm finding the areas that I want to add my shadows. Now, for the most part, that means 2 places or 2 points where, 2 points where 2 things meet. Why can't I talk? Who knows? Anyway, and then where one object lays over another. So here I'm going in and I'm adding a lot of shadows to where my items are, because they would be they're sitting on the ground and that's where they're meeting the ground. So they would be casting shadows. So a lot of that is really decided by kind of what is drawn there. Now, there are some textural lines and things like that are drawn into the ground. And I'm going to play those up too, just to make it a little bit more interesting and not just have this wide expanse of unshaded area. I did do like kind of darker shading closer to the front and lighter shading further from the back, because that would be like kind of off in the distance and we wouldn't necessarily see as much of those dark shadows the further it got away from us. I apologize for being off the screen. I will come back around in just a minute. So I'm working from my darkest color out to my lightest color. If you are a little less confident with your coloring or a little bit more scared of those darker colors, that's totally fine. Just lay out your shadows with your lightest color and work towards your darkest, and then from your darkest back into your lightest. So for the kind of rock formation in the back, I do want this to be a little bit darker, but I want it to be a very similar color to the ground. I want there to be some separation, but I don't want it to be that different, because in all of the pictures that I looked in, for the most part, it wasn't. It was pretty much the same kind of reddish brown as the ground. So I'm going in with an E59 and I'm laying in my shadows with that. It is darker than the E39. And so when I go over that color with the E39, I will add in kind of those reddish hues, and it will act as a way to, I call it color glazing, but it kind of changes the base color and adds in those warm tones. So it almost creates like a darker version of the color that you're already using. I do this a lot with grays too. So I am making sure that I'm adding shading, but also that I'm leaving some areas for some highlights, because without those light areas and the dark areas, we aren't going to have any dimension without those, kind of peaks and valleys. So from here, I'm just going in, kind of blending everything out. I will eventually stretch this scene out, but I'm not there quite yet. You could, like I said, absolutely just stamp this and leave it as is without adding the other 2 pieces, but I really just enjoy kind of mixing it up and changing things up. Also, I'll show you how I blend in those pieces, those die cuts, to help make the scene seem as if it was intended to be that way. So for these rounder ones, they kind of have a lot of peaks and valleys. So there's a lot, they're very round, but there's a lot of areas where the spikes are lifted and there's, the concave pieces in between. So I am just adding my shadows to those darker areas to help give it a lot of dimension. One of the things with alcohol markers is if you are putting a lighter color over a darker color, it can kind of lift it sometimes and make your shadows darker or lighter than what you intended. You can just go back in with the marker and darken those back up. That is what I do. And in this case, I will be doing that. So these are, I mean, I think this is a super fun scene because sometimes it's nice to just like stamp it and just go, like be lost in your thoughts. And, you know, like if you're, I always, whenever I'm doing anything, I'm pretty much listening to music. In fact, I even had somebody I used to work with who I think it stopped playing because it was like it was on a commercial or something. I always had music playing even when I was dispatching. And like he walked in my office and he was like, "It's so weird. It's never quiet in here because you're always listening to music." And in the past, probably like 6-7 months, I have recently found audiobooks, which I shared with you guys. So I've been listening to those a lot more often than music. But it does, you know, kind of allow me to kind of be lost in thought and enjoying, you know, just the coloring and the making. I am still working on my cross stitch. I am making my son a Christmas stocking, and I know some of you had asked about seeing that, and I think maybe either I can show you in a live or maybe I can take a picture and post it in the channel. Let me know which one of those would work better for you. So here I've moved on to my next green combination. We started with the yellow greens. Now we're going more of like a true green, and the true greens I kept for the kind of more traditional shaped cactus, I guess. This is the cactus I think of when I think of a cactus, is this general shape, like kind of with the arms. They're not branches, right? They're arms. I think we had this conversation once. But anyway, so I am using a couple of different colors, especially for the ones that are up close. The ones that are a little bit further back, I may still use 3 colors, but I'm not using as much of each color, or I may just go down to the 2, the dark and the mid-tone, because they're kind of just back there. You know, and we wouldn't see as much detail, which helps give our scene depth by switching up the way that we're coloring, not necessarily changing the colors, though you could knock them back. Like if you're using brighter colors, which I tend to do, you could knock them back with some grays, and that would also help push them into the background because they would have less saturated color. But another way that you could do it is just by, you know, changing the amount of colors that you're using and the amount of detail that you're providing. So those ones, you know, like I said, a more traditional green. And then I am going to do a blue green, but I'm actually going to do it 2 ways. So for the, what do you even call that? The desert grass. I'm sure it has a name. If you are from a desert area, can you, like, they're not, what are those things? That tumbleweeds? They're not tumbleweeds. They're grasses in the desert. And I'm sure they have a name beside desert grass. But am I thinking of, I think maybe I'm thinking of pampas grass, but I don't think that's right either for what's in the picture. Anyway, but I'm going to do those a more desaturated combination. So I'm going to do those with a BG 72, 75, and 78. And that 7 in the beginning kind of denotes how bright it's going to be. And because it's a 7, you can, you know, tell that it's going to be pretty grayed out. And so I'm going to do that. And again, like the grasses that are up front will have more kind of depth and dimension, whereas the ones that are in the back, I'm only going to use, you know, maybe there's 1 of 2 colors, or maybe I'll just use some kind of like some dotting, you know, of just a couple of different shades, not really anything that's going to be like the flicking of the detail and things like that. So for the ones that are just kind of like mounds of grasses, I am going to still use a blue-green, but I'm going to use a brighter blue-green combination. I think I ended up going with a BG49, a BG09, but then I'm going to bring back that BG72 and kind of knock it back so that it helps to create a difference in the colors. And for all of these, I'm kind of just turning my marker on its side and kind of like tapping it in. And then this will give me a lot of different color variation and a little more reliant on your brain to kind of fill those areas in. But you can see as we are continually adding color, this whole scene is really coming together. All these different greens and the, different levels of saturation and vibrancy, also, the how much detail that we're putting into them. So you can, see how the edges are kind of like a little bit soft with the brown. I think I went out to an E30 or an E31. You could just leave that here and it would be more like kind of a vignette kind of scene, like a little vignette. Is that how you say that? I can't remember. But anyway, so you could totally leave it like this, stamp a sentiment on it, and it would be great. I'm going to extend it out just a little bit to create a full scene because I'm going to add in those other pieces. So for the flowers, I chose to go with kind of a middle of the road pink. They're an R50s family. So not as bright, but not as desaturated as they could be. And then for the purples, this is definitely a brighter one, but there are not as many. And I'm using more of the 9 and the 6 than I am of the 4, at least for these particular flowers. And then we'll bring in some of the brighter colors in the pieces that are going to be in front. So we'll see a little bit more of those there. For the next section, I am going to do the sky. Now, again, I chose to do a daytime scene, but you could do, beautiful like night sky or a sunset, a sunrise. You can really mix it up, and this would be a great place to kind of bring in extra color. So here what I'm doing is I've chosen my brightest blue as a B02, and then I'm just kind of flicking it into different areas. I still want it to appear as if there's some softer clouds in the background. The clouds that are drawn there are going to be pretty white. Because they already have lines. So I do want there to be kind of an illusion of some lighter clouds in the background. So from that B02, I'm going to work out, going over top of it and then slightly extending out a B01, a B00, and then a B quadruple 0. If you find that you have been a little bit too heavy-handed with your sky colors, and I was here, I'm going to bring in the colorless blender to kind of help me create those lighter areas. So fear not if you have gotten too blue of a sky or, other things, and you're trying to, leave a little bit of a break for some clouds, the colorless blender can really help you out because it really just moves that color around. So if you are consistent with it, you can, move it so that you can get the look that you originally intended. So as far as, I hope you guys had a good, if you live in the US, I hope you had a good 4th of July weekend. We did lots of swimming. We did lots of hosting and lots of fireworks. Normally we're not fireworks people, as far as like letting off our own or anything like that. But, we did take the kids to see fireworks. The city that we live in puts on fireworks like the day before usually. It was a beautiful night. We had great weather. No complaints about that. And they put on a very nice show. Back to the card. So here I am adding just a little bit of shadows to my clouds. I don't want to be too heavy-handed with my grays because I'm really just putting in the shadows. I want my clouds to be nice and, white. But I'm going to blend those out with a C1, and then I will go in with that B kind of quadruple 0 and go back over that so they don't look too storm cloudy, you know what I'm saying? And just add a little bit of that blue, kind of like it would be, picking up from the sky. And And then I will, like we talked about, going in and extending out that scene to make it match my skyline. I will do that, and I'm going to do the same thing with the ground that I did in the center. I'm just kind of going to be continuing the lines out for what I think will look the best, but there isn't like a right or a wrong way to do this. Like, you're pretty much just kind of going with whatever your heart thinks is going to, be copacetic with the scene you've already got going on. So using those same colors. So we did go and see the fireworks. That was on Thursday. Then one of my closest friends from childhood, she usually does a fireworks show. So I had reached out to her and was like, hey, you guys doing fireworks? And she was like, I can't do them on Friday. I'm going to do them on Saturday. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, we had Peanut on the 4th of July. We did not have him over the weekend, that because he was with his dad, and I was like, that's cool, like, he's not going to be there, but we'll bring Jelly Bean down. And so she was like, I'm so sad he's not going to be there. So on Friday like afternoonish, she brought over a box of fireworks for him to be able to light those off. So now that big part of the scene is done, and we're going to move on to these other areas. Now, these ones we want to make sure we're putting plenty of detail in, because they are going to be right up front. So this is where we're going to take our time kind of with our shadows, where those two things, two objects meet, where, one's sitting in front of the other. We're going to make sure that we're, really paying attention to those things and putting in, the detail with our coloring. But the things that we've already done stay the same. So I'm still using the same greens that I used before. I will be pulling in more of the pinks and purples. And the ones on the bottom, I think you could probably get away with coloring like full florals, but I actually colored them more like succulents. So I let like some of the teal, bleed into the purple, or, some of the blue green, that 70s family, bleed into the pink, just to kind of mix those up. Because normally when you see like a flowering cactus, it typically does have that, kind of green that kind of grows up into where the florals are. So anyway, she brought him a whole box of stuff. She brought sparklers. She's like, for the little ones. And then she, brought a whole bunch of other things. And she was like, that way he can, light them off or whatever. So we hosted 4th of July here. We did some, cooking out, swimming, all that stuff. And then that evening, it was just like our family, me, my immediate family, I should say, me, my husband, and our kids, and then my best friend and my goddaughter. So we did fireworks together kind of after everybody went home, and the kids did sparklers and, lit off some fireworks, and that was fun. So then the next morning, Peanut tells me, he was like, I want to go to Aunt Amy's for fireworks. And I was like, well, we'll have to talk to your dad to see. So, and then my best friend was also coming back out. So then I went over to see my dad, because he lives next door to Aunt Amy. That's how long Aunt Amy and I have been friends. And so I went over and saw my dad. My oldest sister was there as well. And then my ex-husband brought Peanut over. We were there with Eric and I were there with Caitlin. So we were all hanging out in the driveway, sitting in the pickup while they were lighting off fireworks. They did an excellent job. But all of this to say, and then yesterday my in-laws came over and we're swimming, and Caitlin called it a picnic, but we really just ate outside on the deck. So it was quite a busy weekend. But I was really surprised. She did really, really well, because, as you guys know, you don't do fireworks until like dusk or after, which was definitely past her bedtime. So surprisingly, she did pretty well with it, even with all of the swimming in between and the heat and everything else. And then this morning, my husband is the one who took her to daycare. And I was like, I hope it wasn't too bad. And he was like, surprisingly for, that early in the AM, she did really well, especially with the weekend she had. So I was quite shocked. I wonder if we will be dropping our afternoon nap soon. They all kind of drop them at different times. So I will be interested to see. I hope not. I love the afternoon nap, mostly because it also means that if I need one, I can take an afternoon nap because mama is tired. So here you can see, like I said, we, colored most of them the same way. I think some of those areas you could probably color as rocks, and I colored them green. I think it works okay either way, but if you wanted to have more, of the brown in there, I think you could color those like rocks and it would be fine. So these are the only 2 dyes for the Out West set because the other one is the full scene. So here I kind of messed around with how I wanted them to lay. I didn't want to cover up too much of the cacti on the front right. So I did scoot the littler one, over a little bit further. And then this one, kind of over to the left. Right now, I realize that it looks a little crazy because we have those white edges. But I'm going to go in and basically whatever color is behind it is how I am coloring to blend them in. So if there is a cactus that's a yellow-green behind it, then I'm coloring in the yellow-green. If there is a cactus that is a blue-green behind it, then I'm coloring in the blue-green. If there's land behind it, I'm coloring it that same, kind of reddish-brown. And the real trick of this is to not just fill in the color, but if there is something you've colored, like the rounder cacti, we did the texture, with the striping, you have to add that in too. Otherwise, it's just going to look like it is a plain green background and it's not going to blend into the scene. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going back in with that darker yellow green and you can see right away how much better it blends into the background. Now, obviously it's not going to be perfection, but we do the best that we can. Once I'm happy with how the die cuts are blending into the background, I'm going to trim off that excess. I'm pretty happy with the way that my scene is looking. So for now, I am just going to stamp my sentiment and then I will get in kind of to more of that detail work that I super enjoy and I feel like kind of sets the card apart. So for the sentiment, I didn't want to cover up any of the coloring that we did. So I chose to just stamp it and heat emboss it. I treated it with my anti-static tool, and then I did stamp it twice with our Brilliant White pigment ink. I chose the sentiment from Saddled Up that says keep your heels down, head up, and your heart wild. I thought that was, really cute, and it fit in nicely. I can't remember if I said, we know there's typos in Saddled Up. They're being pulled, and so the ones that you will be ordering will be the fixed version. So then I decided I wanted to tie in that white sentiment to a little bit of a border. I love a framed look. And so I just trimmed off a little bit. It's just got an 1/8 of an inch border of some white cardstock. And I feel like between the sentiment and the clouds and the border, that's kind of help bring everything together. You could probably do a colored one as well, but I just felt like the white kept it nice and clean, which is the look that I prefer. So then from here, I am, of course, going to add some shimmer because I am me and I glitter all the things. So I added it to the cacti, to the flowers, just so that there was a lot of nice, little shimmers in there. And then here is where the white gel pen is super helpful, especially with the cacti. So I did add some white highlights along that rock outcropping. For the taller one here, that's kind of right up front, I did more of flicking strokes to act as my pine needles because that is the type of they have the longer spiky ones. So that is how I treated those. For the ones that are a little bit, they're not the round ones because those have really furry ones. But the ones in between, they kind of remind me of the pokey character from the original Super Mario. Those ones I did not flick, I just did dots. And then for, like I said, the round ones, I really kind of flared them out. I was super happy with the way that this came out. I hope that it gives you more confidence to kind of tackle these more involved scenes. Thank you guys so much for spending your time with me. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.